Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, Ryan Pepiot looked great in his first career win. Chris Taylor celebrated his bobblehead night by going on the injured list, apparently. And a whole bunch of relievers are really good, and one reliever isn't going on the injured list. So, plenty to talk about. So, let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Dodger fans. This is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now, and then you will never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time watching or listening, I am Jeff Snider. That guy next to me is Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue every day. So let's talk about the Dodgers. The Dodgers finally are no longer under 500 against the Rockies this year. They're up to 4-4 now after beating them 5-2 on Tuesday night. I think the big story is probably Ryan Pepiot getting his first career win. He was much more efficient than he was in his previous 3 starts, and that allowed him to go 5 innings. Probably could have gone even more, but no reason to push his pitch count too hard, and looked really good. Only walked one guy. Walks have been kind of his big issue. Allowed 4 hits and 1 walk and just 1 run in 5 innings, and earned that first win, and kind of showed glimpses, I think, Vince, of why people are really excited about Ryan Pepiot.
He looked different in the sense of how he was attacking hitters. Now, that was probably because he was throwing more strikes and was able to, be ahead in the count and able to throw different pitches in different situations. I mean, he, threw some elevated fastballs. He threw a slider on one to break up an 11-pitch at bat. And it wasn't a great slider, but it was enough differentiator off the changeup and fastball for him to get that swing and miss that he was looking for after such a long at bat. The changeup's always going to be there, but it was a matter of him figuring out how to use it before, because guys don't chase as often as they do in the minor leagues. But how you can help that is, like I said, by throwing more strikes. I think he was 65% strikes on the night. Finally went to 5 innings in order to qualify for a win. As much as wins don't matter in the grand scheme of things, it's at least for him good enough for him to know that he pitched 5 innings. So it was fun to see, fun to watch. He still gave up hits here and there, but he didn't let them compound, and he didn't help them compound by walking people. So it was good effort. And I mean, we see a lot of people around the league talk about the Dodgers and calling up a guy and he's all of a sudden a good, even though Ryan Pepiot hasn't gone deep into games, Ryan Pepiot's got a 2.7 or 2.6 ERA now after 4 starts. So even though they haven't been long starts, he's been pitching well.
Yeah, the parallels to Tony Gonsolin are pretty darn obvious. Guy with a really good changeup who comes up and struggles to throw strikes, and but when he is in the game, so he doesn't get deep in games, but when he's in the game, he's pitching really well. And I don't think it's a coincidence that, 2 changeup pitchers have this same thing, as like you mentioned, as we've talked about before. I really do believe that there's a bigger margin or learning curve for changeup pitchers in the big leagues, because every level you go up, they chase less. And, that slider you mentioned to strike out Ryan McMahon on the 13th pitch of the at bat, it's always it's tough to tell on TV how good a slider is. Clayton Kershaw slider, sometimes you can't even see the movement, but it's good because nobody can hit it, and this one, like you mentioned, the change in direction, because his fastball has a little tail to it, his changeup has a ton of tail to it, and just that basically same velocity as a changeup, but going the other direction, that little bit was all that it took to get the strikeout. And that kind of shows you why starting pitchers need to have 3 pitches, because you do have to have that 3rd pitch to keep guys off balance. You can get through the lineup once, face a guy once, you could probably get by with 2 pitches, sometimes even 1 pitch, depending on how good that pitch is. But when you start trying to be a starting pitcher, you got to have that third pitch. And I think Pepiot's slider is plenty good to be his third pitch because his fastball is good, has good life and good velocity, and his changeup's outstanding. As we're watching him, Vince, I don't know. Did you feel like this was an audition start with the Dodgers looking for starting pitching on the trade market? And, a team like the Reds, if they were going to give up Luis Castillo, would probably be looking for a young pitcher in return. And I don't know, as Dodger fans, I feel like, we get flashbacks every time we hear the name Delano DeShields. And, that we're depending on how things keep going, we may start getting those same flashbacks when we hear the names Josh Fields or Tony Watson. And, are we afraid that, are we going to hear the name Luis Castillo and think, oh, we could have had Ryan Pepiot?
I definitely think this start checked a few boxes for the Dodgers. It did break up and give everybody an extra day of rest on a long stretch of games. But it, very conveniently sits at the start of July when the trade deadline comes. Well, early August for now, but usually in July, the end of July. So, yeah, I do think it was a little bit of both. It's similar, not completely similar to Josiah Gray last year because the Dodgers needed Josiah Gray to pitch last year when he did come up, and then he ended up getting traded. And, I don't know. It's one of those things where with the Dodgers, a lot of the times, Ryan Pepiot wasn't a heralded draft pick. He's a little bit lower draft pick, worked his way up. A lot of these guys that the Dodgers have traded in the past, you think about Jose De Leon in the past, you think about other guys that they've traded away in the past. You think about Grant Holmes the opposite way, who was a top, I think, first rounder and hasn't really become much of anything. But Frankie Montas, one of the ones they also traded in that trade, has become a guy, and everyone's awaiting his MRI results. But it's a matter of, I think for the Dodgers, it's one of those, they already got the value out of him. He's able to pitch in the major leagues. And if they can turn that value into something that helps them in the playoffs and beyond, then I think they take it as a win. But yeah, it's hard to say what exactly you want. But I do think, as we've seen in the past, a guy like Ryan Pepiot is going to bring you back someone premium. Just like last year where Josiah Gray and Keeper Ruiz brought two premium players, one that stuck or one that had one more year left and one that didn't end up sticking around.
Yeah, when you mentioned Jose De Leon, I suddenly remembered a tweet of mine from early 2017 when the Dodgers traded De Leon for Logan Forsythe, and there were a lot of people worrying about the Delano DeShields, Pedro Martinez parallel, and so I actually made a list of the 94 young pitchers the Dodgers traded after they traded Pedro Martinez, who didn't make the Hall of Fame. And there's some names on here. Some names you've heard, like Edwin Jackson. Some names you never heard again, like Francisco Cruzetta and Jared Plummer. So yeah, I mean, the vast majority of these trades, these guys don't turn into superstars. I don't know. I'm higher on Pepiot than I was on Josiah. I like both of them, if for no other reason that they've both been guests on this very podcast. But I am really high on Ryan Pepiot, and I hope if the Dodgers do trade for Luis Castillo, I hope it's a different guy. I don't know. And maybe that guy ends up being the Hall of Famer. I don't know.
Yeah, for me, I think for me personally, Bobby Miller is more untouchable than Ryan Pepiot at this point. And realistically, if you're going to get somebody of that caliber, Luis Castillo, it probably comes down to at least one of those two being involved. So, you can go different ways and give maybe four guys up that are a little bit better than usual instead of like one premium guy and a couple.
Or you could have the premium guy be a position player.
Yeah.
And have, a lesser pitching prospect, but be headlined by a guy like Andy Pajes or somebody like that. I think Bobby Miller is as close to untouchable as it gets right now. Bobby Miller and Diego Cartaya, I don't think there's anybody on the trade market right now who would warrant either of those guys. And Pepiot is just below the untouchable mark, I think, but would have to definitely bring back a Hall.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we're going to come back in just a minute. We're going to talk about Chris Taylor going on the injured list and some of the ramifications that might have. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. Hey, tell me if this describes you. I am a person who has a little bit of money and someone I love in my life, and I would like to buy that someone jewelry, but I don't know what I'm doing. Raise my hand because that describes me. And that's why I am really excited about BlueNile.com. Whether you want to just buy jewelry for a special occasion, an anniversary or something, a birthday, or for no reason at all, just because, hey, I like to surprise my special someone with jewelry, or if you are looking to find an engagement ring or a wedding band because you're getting married soon, anything that you need jewelry wise, BlueNile.com is the place to check it out. And the best part is, for me, I always end up just asking my wife what she wants because I don't know how to pick out jewelry. Well, I don't have to do that anymore because Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7 available via phone or chat to help you and me find a memorable gift at every budget. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. All right, we are back, and there's some stuff to talk about injury-wise. We'll talk about Craig Kimbrell's injury in the last segment today, but first we're going to talk about Chris Taylor's injury. He fouled the ball off his foot on Saturday, took Sunday off, was in the starting lineup on Monday, only played part of the game, came out because of residual swelling. They sent him for a CT3 scan, and it came back that he has a fracture in his foot. And that's bad news. It means definitely going on the injured list. Dave Roberts said he's hopeful it'll only be a few weeks. Max Muncy said Chris Taylor is one of the toughest people he's ever known, so he expects him back sooner than later. That seems to be the common theme. Even the fact that Taylor was out of the lineup or had to come out during a game, people said, well, it must be serious because Chris Taylor is way too tough to do that. We know he was a wrestler in high school, and wrestlers are kind of famously tough. Maybe I'm just saying that because I was a wrestler and I'm famously tough. But, me and CT3 have a lot in common. That's what I'm saying. Except he has a broken foot and I don't. And, I wish I had it instead of him. If he could transfer that fracture to my foot, I'd take it.
Yeah, same. When it comes down to it, it's interesting. The fracture is small enough. He's not going to be in a walking boot. I saw him before the game. He was walking around in some slides. He was out there on the field in the pregame ceremony because it was his bobblehead night, catching a pitch from his fiance. And it just looked weird because we just had found out that he had a fracture in his foot, and he's just out there in normal clothes, normal shoes, and everything else, squatting down to take a pitch from his fiance. But it's obviously going to hurt the Dodgers in a variety of ways. We talked about yesterday kind of offensively, maybe right now, not so much it's going to affect him. He's been struggling a little bit. He's been striking out a lot lately. Hasn't necessarily been the guy that you expect at the plate, but defensively, you're going to get a lot more moving parts now. We'll talk right now about Justin Turner and Max Muncy. They are guys who probably aren't going to get as many days off anymore. I mean, they weren't getting too many days off already, but they might not get any now. It's a good thing that they're hitting. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those where we're not going to see him before the All-Star break. You hope that we see him before August starts. And it's one of those where he's got to just rest and let it heal because, he's a guy that uses speed to his advantage on defense and on offense. And it's somebody that the Dodgers need back. And he's also, usually when he has cold spells, the hot spell comes back. So hopefully when he comes back, he'll be back and hot and, maybe this clears his head a little bit.
Yeah, for as bad as he looks during his cold spells, you're right. They don't last very long, and he can get hot just as quick. A little bit Yasiel Puig-ish in that way, where one day you're wondering how he's ever hit the ball. The next day you're wondering how anybody's ever gotten him out. And yeah, it's a bummer. It means, probably more playing time for Trace Thompson, at least in the short term. They obviously can put Gavin Lux out there and left. And, if they want to, and that kind of brings up the question of what we think the corresponding move will be because, we know that Ryan Pepiot is getting sent down. We'll talk more about that, but these corresponding moves might, with Pepiot being sent down and Chris Taylor going on the injured list, that means they're adding two players to the roster on Wednesday before the game. And, the pitcher who they add, you assume it'll be one pitcher, one position player. The pitcher might end up being the actual corresponding move for Chris Taylor, because Garrett Clevenger, I think, is the only pitcher they have in the minors right now who is a relief pitcher and who's on the 40-man roster and who is eligible to be recalled, because when you go down as a pitcher, you have to be down for 15 days. And Justin Brule and Reyes Maranta, both, I know Maranta because he just got sent down, and Brule, I'm pretty sure it hasn't been 15 days yet.
July 1st, so yeah, he's not close.
So it's just been a few days. And so, but the exception to that is in the case of an injury. And so you can replace a player who went on the injured list with a guy who hasn't been in the minors for 15 days. So they could call up Brule or Maranta if it's a corresponding for, but so I guess segment, but knowing there will be one position player, you've got Zach McKinstry, who is on the injured list. I think is eligible to come. I can't remember when he went on, but it's only 10-day injured list for position players, so he should be fine. He's eligible. He's been doing a rehab stint with Oklahoma City, and so that's maybe the one that makes the most sense. The only other guy on the 40-man roster who seems like a real possibility would be Eddie Alvarez, but he would then have to be that injury exception for Taylor, which would limit their options on pitchers. And then the only kind of the dark horse outside shot would be Jason Martin, another outfielder, a left-handed hitting outfielder who has been hitting really well. We talked about him a week or two ago, and he's hitting really well at AAA, but he's not on the 40-man roster, so that would require yet another corresponding move. So maybe now isn't the right time for that. So I don't know. Is it as simple as just all right? Let's end Zach McKinstry's rehab stint and call him back up?
Yeah, so I'm looking at it now. McKinstry went on the 10-day injured list on June 28th, so he wouldn't even be eligible to be that non.
Oh,
yeah. So
yeah, he's a day short.
Yeah, so it is going to be interesting how they do it. I don't know if they would want to wait that one more day before they just call him up the next. They played last night with CT3 not being available to play. I don't know if they would want to risk that again, but that could be the way they go about it. So yeah, it's gonna be one of those where we find out tomorrow, and I don't really know which way they could go. There's a lot of ways they could go now, with that being the case.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good segue. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about relief pitching, because that is going to tie into that, because if they did try to wait another day on Taylor, that also makes them wait another day on the bullpen move, and that might not be preferable simply because of how the bullpen was used tonight. So let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about Craig Kimbrell and a bunch of other relievers and where they're at and how they're doing. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Vince. So we we need to talk about this bullpen stuff, and it really is all interconnected, because, like you said, they could hold off, play with a short bench one more day before putting Chris Taylor on the IL. But the only benefit to that would be that they could then use Taylor going on the IL to call up Brule or Maranta and not have to use that to call up Eddie Alvarez. But I don't know that that's really an option, because Evan Phillips and Phil Bickford both threw enough pitches on Tuesday night that they are probably unavailable. Dave Roberts hinted in his post-game presser that a couple guys would be unavailable, or down is the word he uses, on Wednesday. He did say Craig Kimbrell will be available. Craig Kimbrell's CT scan, a CK scan, came back clean. He has no structural damage, and he said he's still the closer, and he will be available on Wednesday, which I'm excited for. I'm excited to see him bounce back. I really do think his struggles on Sunday had to do with being hit by the ball, and hopefully he can bounce back and be good. But, they probably don't want to play with a short bench and a short bullpen, and so it seems like let's make some moves. And so I guess, Vince, if we assume that Chris Taylor goes on the injured list and the Dodgers use that injury exception, do you think Moranta comes right back, or do you think Justin Brule comes back up?
I mean, I would like it to be Justin Brule just based on how he's pitched this season and even how he pitched when he came back the other night. Moranta's been a guy who you're not putting into a game that's close unless you're down a bunch of other guys in your bullpen. Moranta's a guy we've seen clean up some games or close out some games when they're up by multiple runs. And the other night, he wasn't even able to do that. So I would prefer it be Brule. But if Moranta never left the city of Los Angeles, then it might just be him based on that.
Yeah, I guess the other thing in favor of Brule is Moranta has pitched a lot lately, and so he might actually, not that he'd be unavailable on Wednesday anyway, but less available maybe. I haven't looked at Oklahoma City's game logs, so I don't know if Justin Brule has pitched recently, because that could come into play too. There's also Garrett Clevenger down there who wouldn't need the Chris Taylor IL exemption, which then they could use it for Eddie Alvarez. And yeah,
it looks like Brule hasn't pitched since he got optioned.
Okay.
Oh wait, no, never mind.
Never mind is what I do best.
Sometimes I
preemptively never mind. Okay. But they might have to go with Clevenger though, who's available, just so that they can use that injury exception to recall Eddie Alvarez on the position player side, since, as we mentioned, Zach McKinstry isn't quite ready to come off the IL. Yeah, it's a tricky thing. And I guess the one other thing with this being the Dodgers that we probably ought to acknowledge the possibility of is phantom IL for somebody else. There could be, David Price, or, one of the guys who pitched through a lot of pitches tonight, Phil Bickford. It could be, hey, Phil, your arm's a little tired, isn't it? You a little bit sore? All right, let's put you on the IL. They probably wouldn't want to do that with a pitcher, just because they do have the 15-day minimum. Might be more likely with a position player. But there are ways to get a second injury exemption to get guys called up, but that would then mean another guy you have to replace on the roster. So everything has butterfly effect, I guess. But I did want to talk a little bit about Evan Phillips and Brusdar Graterol in this game on Tuesday night. They both looked outstanding. Like, Evan Phillips has the stuff to be that guy. Evan Phillips, I feel like a year from now, he could be the Dodgers closer with the stuff that he has right now. And obviously there's confidence involved. But I don't know if you saw from where you were because you were at the game. So I don't know if you were watching a screen or not when Phillips was pitching. He had that 98-mile-an-hour fastball. It felt like Dustin May a little bit. It 98 and that tailing action, not quite as much movement as the Dustin May pitch that made Manny Machado look silly, but that same kind of concept. And then he's got that nasty slider. And I mean, CJ Cron he's a good hitter and the biggest threat on the Rockies. And he came up representing the tying run, and Evan Phillips said, "Sit down. I'm not even worried about you." Struck him out with a couple nasty sliders. Evan Phillips, he's a dude.
Yeah, he's becoming that guy, and he is a big reason why right now the loss of Trinan hasn't been completely terrible, and Daniel Hudson, because he's kind of stepped into that role. The Dodgers have seemed to put a premium the last few years more so on somebody being that like fireman type that Roberts calls it, where they can come in at any point, kind of after the sixth inning, the biggest point of the game, and get outs and get strikeouts. Blake Trinan's filled that role. Daniel Hudson had filled that role for Trinan. Now Phillips has seemingly filled that role for both of them. And the closer hasn't been, as much of as we've seen Vincent and Kimbrel, the closer hasn't necessarily been the guy that's your best reliever. Now Phillips has been that guy that's become the best reliever, and He's down to a 1.65 ERA on the season. He's pitched in 32 games. He has 39 strikeouts in 32 and 2/3 innings. His whip is 0.86. I mean, all the numbers are there. Like you mentioned, he hadn't a lot of earned run in the last 15 games. I mean, he's been that guy. And for the Dodgers, that's what they need. They need these guys to kind of emerge. I mean, even in the month of June, he got some votes for reliever of the month, which is pretty tough to do when you're not a closer. In the month of June, he pitched 11 innings, gave up a total of 5 hits and 1 run, which was unearned. And he's just been outright dominant. He took his ERA all the way down to 1.80 from 2.57 in the month of June. So, yeah, he's that guy right now, and he helps everyone else kind of fill in around him, and he makes Dave Roberts' job a lot easier.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the month of June. Not like he got hot in June.
Yeah.
He allowed 3 runs on April 30th to the Tigers. Since then, 1 earned run in 22 1/3 innings. That's a 0.40 ERA in 2 months, a little over 2 months, and 22 1/3 innings. Like, that is legit, real dominance over a long period of time. And really, I mean, he had that blip against the Tigers, 3 runs, and he had the 2 runs he allowed on opening day, or anyway, in Colorado in that opening series. And other than that, he's allowed 1 earned run in all the rest of his games combined, other than those 2 bad games. Like, Evan Phillips, really good. The other one, Brusdar Graterol, another guy, who a lot of people think future closer. And obviously he's got the velocity. He's got the stuff. Yeah. Sometimes he has a swing and miss stuff. Sometimes he doesn't. He did on Tuesday night. He looked really good. He was mixing in. It's funny because for a guy who could throw 102, the key to Brusdar Graterol's success is the off-speed stuff. And that means using the fastball to set it up, not throwing the fastball down the middle. But that slider is really good. And he's got a cutter too. And so, I mean, he has got good stuff. And if he can figure out the right pitch mix and everything, the version of Brusdar Graterol that we saw on Tuesday night, I wouldn't mind seeing that every time he's out.
Yeah, and he's really stepped up, like you mentioned. Last 13 appearances, just that 1 home run to Marcell Ozuna, which was more so on the pitch selection rather than execution. It wasn't a bad pitch, but it was the wrong pitch to throw to a guy like Ozuna, who, at least from what I can tell, doesn't handle velocity as well as he used to. And he kind of let him get his arms around that one. But, before, other than that, he hadn't allowed a run since back in those 2 implosion games against the Mets where he gave up where he had back-to-back days of giving up 3 runs. Since then, he's only allowed runs in that 1 game. His strikeouts have picked up here and there. He's had a couple of 2 strikeout appearances. He had a 2 strikeout appearance last night. And, yeah, he's been that guy. And it got me thinking, if Kimbrel had been hurt, it was one of those where I think they'd probably go like by committee and just kind of fill in where need be. But Graterol would fit the bill in terms of he's getting a clean inning. When Graterol comes in with a clean inning, he is better suited to throw a clean inning, because when he comes in with runners on base, he's not that strikeout guy yet. And you're not necessarily going to prevent runs all the time because he does allow contact. Even if it's soft contact, it's still a matter if he can get beat by bloop singles or even a couple ground balls and a fly ball and a run can score, whatever the case, how he comes in. So in the future, like you said, we've thought about him as future closer. Doesn't get those strikeouts, but he does pitch well when he comes in clean innings. But yeah, either way, he's been another guy that's really stepped up, and we haven't really felt the impact of the loss of Trinan or Hudson yet because of guys like Phillips and Graterol.
Yeah. So Phillips is likely to be down on Wednesday because of how many pitches he threw. Bickford has, I think, pitched 2 straight games, so he's likely to be down. Graterol has also pitched 2 straight games, so he's likely to be down. And so they will be looking for a little bit of depth today from Mitch White. And hopefully the Rockies are throwing out Jose Urania or Urania. Anyway, he won't have Ronald Acuna to throw at, so I don't know what he's going to do from the mound. But yeah, hopefully Dodgers can knock Urania around a little bit and make it an easy game so they can, hey, David Price throws a couple innings or something. But we didn't even really get a chance to dig in too much about the good team win offensively, because the offense, they only scored 5 runs only, but they had a huge home run from Max Muncy. Muncy was on base all 4 times, scored 3 runs. Justin Turner had 2 more hits, continues his hot streak. Mookie Betts hit a home run. And I think that Betts' home run was the only hit from the top 3 guys in the order. And so it was the rest of the lineup kind of doing their job. And it was kind of nice to see the middle of the lineup do it for once, which hasn't been the case many times this season. But Justin Turner's looking great. And hopefully the Dodgers can put it together. The Padres and Giants both lost again on Tuesday, so the Dodgers continue to gain ground on them. I know the Padres are off on Wednesday. I'm not sure about the Giants, but Padres are the ones closest. So the Dodgers are up by 5.5 on the Padres right now. If they can finish this sweep with the Rockies, it would be a 6-game lead, and that would be great news heading into this series with the Cubs.
Yeah, and I think I saw a tweet from Shakin on June 19th, the standings. The Padres were half a game back, and the Giants were 3.5 or 2.5 back. Standings as they sit now, 5.5 and 10.5. So the Dodgers have done well while these other teams have faltered. And then one quick note on one guy, Michael Grove hasn't pitched since June 29th. And if, Mitch White realistically is not going to give you that length, so maybe that's another name that could be.
That's actually a good idea. We should have talked about that more earlier, Yeah, kind of go with the piggyback start. Instead of calling up a true reliever, call up a piggybacker and kick the can down the road a little bit for who you actually replace with the reliever. Interesting. So, yeah, they've got options. That's the point of this Locked On Dodgers. The Dodgers have options, and they've won 5 out of their last 6 games, and they're extending their lead in the division. And so it's a good time to be a Dodger fan.
It always is, but yeah, even better now.
Absolutely. That's going to do it for us today. We want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. It means the world to us. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. If you're not watching or listening to Locked On Dodgers every day, we would love if you add 1 or 2 days a month to your rotation. If you have friends or family who love the Dodgers as much as you do, please tell them about the show. We'd love to have new listeners, and hopefully they'll like it as much as you do. You can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at Vince Samperio. I am on Twitter at Snidog, and the DMs are open in all of those places. Our email address is lockedondodgers@gmail.com, and our phone number for voicemails or text messages is 323-863-LOCK-5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good one.